Hello and welcome to the third section of the title Deploying Web Apps with Webpack. In the previous sections, we have had a look at loaders and what they do, as well as prepared our project for React by installing Babel, configuring Babel, and creating a basic React application. We have also looked at a few other useful loaders that allow you to import raw files, which was the raw loader, XML files, and JSONs, for which we use the XML loader and JSON loader respectively. In this section, we will talk a bit more about handling assets inside our project. We'll firstly focus on loading style sheets and getting them into your application. From what you've seen so far, we have only been able to load JavaScript files into our application, but we will have a look at how to load style sheets, and we'll also have a look at how to compile SCSS files into CSS and then add them into our application. Then we will have a quick look at how to work with images and how to bundle those together with our bundle files from Webpack. We'll also have a look at how to try and optimize the images in case there are very large images, try and scale them down a little bit, and then make sure we ship a file as small as possible for the user so that the application loads fast. And then towards the end of the section, in the last video, we'll have a look at configuring public paths, which we will use in case we need to include any external files to our application, or if you plan on using any CDN assets, you will be able to do that using public paths. In the first video of this section, we will be talking more about style sheets with Webpack. We will be looking at how to handle those style sheets, how to get them inside your app, and how to get them executing the style sheet on your application. We'll first have a look at all the required loaders. As you can see, there is 3 of them. We need the Styl Loader, the CSS Loader, and then we will also use the Sass Loader in order to allow us to write Sass instead of pure CSS. Then we will look at how to load our CSS in our app and also how to configure our dev server to increase our development speed when working with CSS and Sass. And then we will also look at how to create a separate bundle in which we can store all our styles, so that our style files and JavaScript files are not mixed into the same bundle.js. So going back to our project, we will need to do a few small modifications to the project, especially since last time we've included React in it, and React is a really large library. We will temporarily disable React and take it out of our project so that we can have a look at what Webpack does with style sheets. So if you remember, we had our Hello World application, and we have our dev server running and watching our files. First of all, let's close this, and then let's go back into our Webpack config and do a bit of cleanup in our files. So first of all, since we're not going to be using the raw loader and a few of other of those loaders, let's remove them from the project. So we will remove our raw loader. We'll also not be using any XML and JSON, so make sure you remove those as well. I'm only doing this for the simple purpose of keeping the Webpack configurations as easy as possible and as concise as possible without adding any extra unnecessary loaders to it. So we will save this. At this point, we're only testing for JS and JSX files, which are being processed by our Babel loader. Now, we will also remove some of the files in our application, so we do not need the demo.txt file anymore, so we will delete this one. And as I mentioned before, we will be using our index.ejs template, so we can remove our index.html file as well, which was the initial template that we've created for the app. So let's delete this one as well. Okay, now that we have done that, we can create a new file into our source, which will be our main CSS file that we're going to work with. So we'll do new file. Let me just zoom in a little bit in here. So we'll do a new file. We will call this file, just for consistency's sake, we will keep it as app.css for now. And this will be the file we load all our CSS in. So for a starter, let's go with, let's change the color of the body. And we will change this to, let's do a light blue. So let's do, in our case, I think it's called Alice Blue, or I'll just do the hex code for it. So we'll do F0F8FF, just so we do not have problems when viewing the screen. So we have created our CSS files. Now, what we also want is we want to take React out of our application. So if you remember from our Webpack config, the entry point is app.js. So we'll need to go in app.js and make sure we remove any references to our React code, because otherwise it will always try and import React. So we will comment all those lines. We keep them in here because once we see exactly how the CSS loaders work, we will go back and style an actual React application. And let's just add some basic HTML in here. If you remember, in the template, we have our root div, so we can just do a const root equals document get element by ID, and then we will do root. And then we also want to add some text just so we have something to see on the screen. We will do root dot inner HTML equals root dot inner HTML plus, let's say, a string, a simple string, hello world. There we go. So now at this point, if we go back into our terminal and we run yarn, we should get our dev server running on port 8080. And then we have, as you can see in the Webpack, in the log, we're only using app bundle.js and index.html without importing the whole React library. So let's go back in here, refresh. As you can see, we have a hello world. And then if we look at all the files that have been loaded, you will see we have the JavaScript app.bundle.js. If we open this in a new tab, we can see our bundle.js, and then let's look for, you'll see there's a lot of configuration from the dev server, but let's look for our hello world. So as you can see, we're bundling this hello world into our application. Now at this point, because we have all the loaders set up for JS and JSX, there will be, when going back into our bundle.js and looking at it, we will see it imports all the dependencies that are used in those files as well. So let's go back and temporarily comment those lines and remove them from our application, just so we do not have all this code showing up in here. So let us go back into our Webpack config and remove those loaders from our code. So we will just remove them from here by commenting. We will save this, and then we will also go into our package.json and comment out all the loaders that we are not using at this point. We can remove our Babel loader, our Babel core, and the presets if we want to. I will keep them in for now just because if I remove them now, we'll need to install them again. But if you want to see a smaller bundle.js, feel free to remove them from here. Going back to the topic of importing our CSS, we go back into our app CSS and we will need to require our CSS files. So we will do CSS. Let's do var CSS, or actually let's define it as a constant in this case, const CSS. We'll need to require, and we will require our app.css that we have just created, app.css. Now, if at this point we save the file, if we go back into our terminal, we will see we get an error saying that we might need an appropriate loader to handle this file type. This is because we have not installed yet our CSS loader, and we have not configured Webpack to work for it. So for this, we will quit our build, and then we will yarn add our CSS loader, and we will install this as a dev dependency, of course. And once this is installed, we will go back into our webpack config.js, and we will create a new rule that will test for CSS files. So let's create a new rule. We are testing for .css files, and we are looking to use our CSS loader with those. So in this case, we'll use the CSS loader and save our webpack config. Don't forget to put the CSS loader within quotation marks. Now going back into our terminal, if we run the build, we will see that our bundle compiles correctly. And however, if we go and refresh the page, so if we refresh our dev server, you will see nothing happen. So let's have a look, see if the CSS is being loaded. So if we go into the CSS tab in Chrome under network and refresh the page, we'll see there is no CSS file loading. However, if you go into our JavaScript and then open our bundle.js, so let's open our bundle, open a new tab, and then we will just look for the color that we've added, background color. So as you can see, our CSS, let me just zoom in on it a little bit. So background color. The line that we have in our CSS has already been included in our file. However, it is not displaying in our web application. Now, the reason why this is happening is because whenever you include a style in your browser, the browser doesn't know to process it from inside the CSS file. So what we need to do is we need to either import it as a CSS, as a .css file, or inline it somehow into our document. Otherwise, the browser does not know how to handle CSS from inside the JavaScript file. To handle this situation, there is another loader that we can use, which is called the Styl Loader. So let's quickly have a look at how to install the Styl Loader. So we'll look for the Styl Loader, and we'll find the Styl Loader module for Webpack. And if we go into the documentation, we'll see we need to install it. So we will install it as a dev dependency. So yarn add, it's called Styl Loader. And again, this will be a dev dependency. And if we take a look at the documentation, we'll see how to make it include our CSS. One thing we have not discussed about when we spoke about loader was the ability of Webpack to chain loaders together. So if you need to chain loaders together, you can do so by including multiple loaders whenever in your Webpack config, whenever you do the test use declaration. So if we have a look here, what you can see is the syntax that they recommend in the Styl Loader page. So we'll need to use the Styl Loader first, and then in that we will pipe the CSS loader. Keep in mind the loader that processes, the closer it is to the end of the processing, needs to be in front of the other loaders. So we will add our Styl Loader together with our CSS loader when testing for CSS files. So let's go back into our config, and then let us replace this with this. So we're loading, first of all, the Styl Loader, which is processing the result of the CSS loader. We'll now save our Webpack config.js, and then just run the dev server again. And at this point, once everything is loaded, if we go into the browser and refresh our template, there we go. We have our background color, the one that we've set in our CSS. So let me just zoom a bit on the page. And if we inspect this, if we go into the head of the document, you will see our CSS will be included automatically as a style script.